Years ago that circumstances dictated that you play your home games at Hartlepool. Now you're looking forward to a Wembley game. You must be really proud.
We're delighted actually, Colin, because as you mentioned there, we're 3.5 years old as a new company. I mean, Middlesbrough Football Club has been in existence for a long, long time. But the new company was formed in '86, in August, and in that time we've actually achieved a great deal. We've gone from liquidation to a Wembley final. We've actually had 2 promotion campaigns in that short spell, and 1 relegation, dropping out of the First Division on the first attempt. But I think for many of the Middlesbrough people, the highlight of their lifetime will be to see their club, their team, go to Wembley. I've not long been on Teesside, but I've read the coverage of the club. They've been to semi-finals in the past. They've been close to getting to Wembley before, and failed at the final attempt. And many people have said that there's a curse on the ground and that it should be exercised and so on. But you have to have a lot of optimism in this game and a lot of optimism in life. And in fact, reading some of the newspaper articles locally before our final game against Aston Villa, I felt that some of the articles were written a little bit pessimistic. But you have to have that optimism, and I generally believe that if we did the things right on the night, then we would get to Wembley, and so it's turned out. And I'm particularly pleased for the supporters, obviously, because they've waited 114 years, I believe, to go to Wembley. The town will be excited. I'm particularly pleased for the chairman and his directors, because they came along at a period when the club was at its lowest ebb and managed to pick the reins. They stayed loyal to the people that were at the club. I was at the club at the time. I didn't know them. Colin Todd was with me. He'd just left a job outside of football. So they've stayed loyal, and for that we thank them. And we're particularly pleased, obviously, for the players, because Middlesbrough Football Club and the team has been made up invariably by local people, local boys. And so the pleasure that it would give the Proctors, the Mowbrays, the Parkinsons, the Pears, the Coopers, the Kernigans, the Ripleys, the Mowens and the McGees, who all come to mind readily as being local lads, will give them immense pleasure on the day. So it's a good achievement, and by everybody at the club.
In fact, it's going to be the nearest thing to the Bolton Cup Final team when they went to Wembley with a team that was all local lads and had all cost a £10 signing-on fee.
Well, it's a far day since then, Colin, but we've got to look forward to it. It's when you go to Wembley, you go to win. When I first went, on my first occasion, I was told that the occasion passes you by very quickly, that you no sooner get onto the pitch to play the game, then you come off at half-time, you go back on, and the game is over. It's the quickest 90 minutes you'll ever come up against. So to enjoy it. The problem was that I came off, it was quite true, the 90 minutes did go quickly, but we came off the pitch and we'd lost 2-0 to Tottenham. That's when I was with Aston Villa. And sitting in the dressing room afterwards, and later on in my career, I realised that I wouldn't quite give the same advice. The advice I would give would be to enjoy it, but we're going there to win the match, because that's really what it's about. It's better to be a winner than a loser. So that will really be the message to the players, at the same time as enjoying the match.
Can we just go through the run, Bruce, of how you got to Wembley? It started off with a home game against Port Vale, and an early shock when Vale took the lead.
Well, we had a bye in the first round, and I believe Port Vale played Sunderland and beat Sunderland at Rioch. And they came to Middlesbrough, and they're a good footballing side, Port Vale. John Rudge has a good side with some good players in his team, and they took an early lead, and they played very well actually on the night. And we came back into that game, and I think it was a power play performance by the team after they scored that won us the match. It wasn't an easy game for us. Our cup performances have been quite good over the past 2 or 3 seasons, and we feel that if we can meet people on level terms at Ayresome Park, or over 2 legs, then we have a great chance of beating teams. But we were pleased to get Port Vale out of the way, because they'd been to the North East on 2 or 3 occasions and had some very good results against the North East teams. And our games against them in the league programme had been close. Draws at Port Vale, very close encounters, but exciting matches. And the game in the ZDS Cup. Sheffield Wednesday again came to Ayresome Park, and there were memories of our last game of the season in the First Division, when on that day we lost 1-0 to Sheffield Wednesday, who stayed up, and Middlesbrough were relegated. And they had a very strong strike force in Atkinson and Hurst, who have good pace, very quick, very alert. Atkinson, in fact, had scored a hat-trick against Middlesbrough when he was with Ipswich. And so we assessed their team, we had a good look at them, and we felt that the one way to play them was to stop the supply to the front players. And we decided that Mark Proctor should do a man-marking job on John Sheridan, and that their strength as a club was from the midfield forward, that the 4 players across their midfield and the 2 front players were their strength, that if we could get into their back line and get in amongst them at the back line, then we would get some joy. And on the night, Mark Proctor's performance was exceptional. He kept Sheridan very, very quiet indeed, and that stopped the supply of service to the front 2. Well, there was a lot at stake, obviously. It goes without saying, playing Newcastle. Good relationships between the management. Jim Smith was at Birmingham City when I played for him, and Colin Todd played for him as well. And they came to Ayresome Park on the evening, not only a local derby, but also a very important cup match. And they'd also brought Roy Aitken down with them, a new player. I think he'd only played 1 game for his club at that time. So the scene was set for quite a battle and quite a task. And the game could have gone either way at some stages. Newcastle had a fair amount of play during opening periods of the game, and we survived 1 or 2 scares at that stage. And then in the last 15 to 20 minutes of the game, I turned to Colin Todd on the bench and said that our boys have become strong again. The confidence, they'd weathered the storm, the confidence was good, and the energy and fitness that the youngsters have came to the fore. And we really started pushing forward. We were getting people forward from the back. Gary Parkinson was getting forward. Colin Cooper on the left flank had started to get forward. In fact, I can recall young McGee crossing to the far post, and Cooper having to wait for the ball to drop that little bit too long, and he had a super volley that was charged down by Ransom, and that was just prior to the goal. And Bernie Slaven receiving the pass out on the right, cutting across the field, and Cooper making a run inside the boy Gallagher, receiving the pass. And in fact, when he received the pass on his right foot, going into the box, we felt that it was all over at that stage, because he's a good finisher. It was on his right foot, and he tucked it away nice and neat. And the fact that the goal was late in the game was obviously a bonus to us as well. Back from those late goals.
An easy passage in as far as the draw goes, because of course there are no replays in this competition. But probably the 2 wins over Aston Villa have given you the most satisfaction.
Well, the fact that we were drawn to play Aston Villa in the area final, I think gave us all a lift initially, because we'd played them, as people would know, in cup competitions previously. We'd played them in the league programme in the 1st and 2nd division previously, and all the games had been top-class games, exciting games. I think Aston Villa had won 2 Little Woods Cup games in the period when we were rebuilding, and most of the other games we either won or we drew. So I think the fact that when the draw was made was a lift to our players. And our first tie was at Aston Villa, as we know, and we decided to approach it not as a cup match, but as a league match. We didn't want to build the players up into a very high emotional state. We wanted to keep them low-key. We said that this game would not be won on the first occasion, but it would take the second game to decide the fate of the tie. That going to Villa Park we will approach it similar to a European match, but on a league-type basis, that it's a run-of-the-mill match. And again, we travelled, Colin Todd and I travelled to Aston Villa on the Saturday to view Aston Villa. They played Port Vale in the FA Cup. They won 6-0. There was a lot of talk about this was the greatest performance that they'd given since Graham Taylor had been in charge. And in fact, Colin and I came back and said that Port Vale committed suicide early in the game by playing too much football in dangerous areas. But they won well, actually, on the day, Villa. So again, we decided to approach the tie with a man-marking system on Gordon Cowans. Again, Mark Proctor would come out and do a specific job for us. They also had a different formation, Aston Villa, to some of the other clubs that we played. They played with Ian Olney as a forward on his own up front, with Daly wide right and Ormondroyd wide left. So we decided to push our two fullbacks in tight and not to let them sit off, and that Nicky Moen and Simon Coleman between them would deal with Olney, and also be aware of Platt breaking from the midfield. We played Alan Kernaghan and Stuart Ripley up the middle, which was a change from our policy because we normally played Bernie Slaven as a front man. But we wanted some strength and some height in our side, because Villa's strength is also set plays, and that's why we added Alan Kernaghan to the team for that occasion. The conditions were atrocious, but if you want to win competitions, whether it be the Zenith Data Systems Cup competition or the Football League, you have to play through a season in all types of conditions. The conditions suited us, actually. We don't mind playing on a wet, heavy surface. And the team started off quite well, but we were caught napping with the goal from Birch. We might have defended better against that when he scored. But really the key in that match was the fact, at that stage, was the fact that we bounced back quickly. Within, I think, 2 minutes of Villa scoring, Alan Kernaghan headed a Parkinson cross onto the crossbar, and before it actually hit the ground, Bernie Slaven had headed in the loose ball, which is typical of a goal scorer. It's the type of goal that a Jimmy Greaves would score, that it doesn't bounce, it's just touched over the goal line. And of course, again, that raised the spirits and the hopes and the confidence of the players enormously. And then, of course, the winner from Mark Brennan, almost in injury time, from the free kick, was an added bonus to us. And as it turned out, was a very important goal for us. And so we left Villa Park having played to a specific game plan. We told the players exactly how we wanted them to play, to stick to the game plan, not to change it, and that we would leave Villa Park with a good result. We left with a result a little bit better than we felt we might have done. And but it was a very exciting game. The supporters on that occasion were magnificent, because the heavens opened, and they sang their hearts out through the whole of the 90 minutes. And just reward, really, for the performance of the team, I felt, on the night, because we did, in fact, in the second half, take the game to Aston Villa and actually dominate that second half period. And a 2-1 scoreline.
Expected to have to come from behind and attack. Now you're in a situation where you're a goal up. Do you defend that lead, or do you try and increase it?
Well, we had to make 1 or 2 changes also. Mark Brennan was suspended. We had to make a decision on whether we brought back Tony Mowbray from suspension. And I felt that it was right to bring the skipper back in. He'd always played well against Aston Villa. And who to leave out. We weren't sure again about the Villa lineup. But what we decided to do was, it was a hard decision to make. We decided to leave Peter Davenport out of the team and to start with the same basis of a team that played at Villa. We put Nicky Moen in at left back instead of young McGee, because of his extra pace and strength and aerial ability. So we slightly changed the side. Aston Villa surprised us, actually, with the formation of their team. They played Ormondroyd wide on the right and Daly on the left, which again, when we look back, suited us. It suited the way we played. We played Bernie Slaven again wide on the left, a position that he doesn't really enjoy. He doesn't enjoy at all, actually. But again, it was for the tactical side of it. And the reason that Peter was left on the bench on that particular night was that, from looking back over my career, on some of the really important games that I've played in, that have gone into extra time, I've found, either with sitting with managers, excuse me, or been involved on the pitch, that you need to introduce a substitute who can be effective on the game at the right time. And we looked at Peter's position and said that if the game was going our way and going well, we could always bring him on to secure it for us because of the way in which he plays. If it wasn't quite going the way we wanted it to go, here's a player we could bring onto the pitch who could actually affect the game in our favour also. So we went with Alan Kernigan and Stuart Ripley again as the two front men. Windy conditions, not ideal to play football in. Pitch was rather lively on the night. Villa were the stronger team in the early stages of the game. We couldn't quite get our game together. I don't think there was any fear in the team. I think the fact that we had the 1-goal advantage and the scoreline was 0-0, the boys were just happy to contain that position. And of course, Steve Pears had made 1 or 2 good saves, and then they scored from a corner. And it was at that time they scored that I was watching Stuart Ripley. He was actually off the pitch with cramp, and as soon as they scored, I decided it was at that stage to put Peter Davenport on. And we look back on that period of going into extra time and saying how invaluable Mark Brennan's goal was now at Villa Park. Without that second goal, Villa would have gone through at the end of 90 minutes. And we introduced Peter Davenport. We released Bernie from the left wing position that had been playing to an orthodox strike and roll. And, well, he was like a free bird. And, of course, going into extra time again, we were very strong indeed. In fact, what I said to the players, I spoke to 1 or 2 of the players at the end of the 90 minutes on the pitch. But basically, I said to Paul Kerr, for example, I said to Paul Kerr that earlier, just before the end of normal time, he'd gotten himself into a lovely inside left position and driven the ball over the crossbar, when a shot at goal, on goal, would have either created a goal or a save that we would put a rebound in. And I said to him that if next time you get a shooting opportunity, you make sure you hit the target. And I basically just said to the players that we're the Borough, let's go out and win the game. Because you're saying that to the nucleus of a team who are born and bred in the area. And there's a lot of feeling when you say that to those players. And we came very strong in that in the extra time period. And the goal that set us on our way from Bernie Slaven was world class. I described it as being world class. It was a corner was taken on the right. I believe it was a corner. Tony Mowbray had gotten his head to an awkward cross. Alan Kernigan had tried an overhead kick. It helped it on to Peter Davenport, who had mishit a shot across the face of the goal. And Bernie had controlled it, had been aware of the defender coming off the line to close him down, had taken it another pace to the side, and then lifted it into the roof of the net. That was a world-class goal at any level, and that really set us on our way. And of course, the second goal came from another corner, a ball driven out from the right to the edge of the box, and Paul Kerr keeping his shot low at last and drove it through a feast of legs into the corner. And I think at that stage we knew we were on our way.
A great victory, wasn't it? But tinged with a little bit of sadness because of the broken leg that Trevor Putney incurred.
Yes, it was sad because I understand that Trevor's had the opportunity with other clubs to go to Wembley on maybe 3 or 4 occasions and missed out on each occasion. And the accident or the injury happened very early on in the game, I think within 4 minutes. And we understand it's a bad break and that Trevor will be out the game for some time. But the boys will rally around him, the club will rally around him. And we wish he has a speedy recovery, obviously. It gave us the opportunity, albeit sad, to introduce young Owen McGee onto the right flank. And the youngster took his chance.
Go out and win it.
Borough, go out and win it. We're going to Wembley to win. It's for the supporters to go in and enjoy it. We want the public, the supporters, the people on Teesside, the people around the country who are supporters of the club. We want you to go on the day and enjoy your day, because that's really what it's about. We're going there.